True War Encounters. Desmond Doss. They said courage needs steel. He brought bandages and saved 14. The first bandage runs out just after midnight. Desmond Doss kneels in the mud at the base of Hacksaw Ridge, Okinawa, his hands shaking as he opens his medical pouch one more time. 3 bandages left, maybe 4 if he tears one in half. A single morphine syringe, a handful of sulfur powder packets. Above him, the ridge plateau burns with tracer fire and the dull thunder of mortar impacts. Somewhere in that chaos, 14 wounded men lie scattered across the charred ground, bleeding out in the April darkness. The stretcher-bearers refused to climb back up an hour ago. The riflemen of the 77th Infantry Division pulled back when the mortars intensified. But Doss heard the screaming, thin, desperate voices calling "Medic" into the wind, and he could not leave. Around him, the remnants of his unit huddle in a collapsed bunker, caked in ash and blood. They watch him with hollow eyes. Some whisper prayers. Others simply stare, convinced they're looking at a dead man. One rifleman, a kid from Ohio who mocked Doss during training for refusing to carry a weapon, leans against the dirt wall and mutters, "Steel wins wars. Rifles win wars. What the hell is he going to do with bandages?" Doss doesn't answer. He loops the pouch strap over his shoulder, checks the frayed rope still tied to a shattered tree stump, and begins climbing. The assault on Hacksaw Ridge started at dawn. The objective was simple: take the plateau, hold the line, push the Japanese back toward the island's interior. But the ridge was a killing field, a sheer rock face rising 30 feet, exposed on all sides, with enemy machine gun nests dug into caves along the rim. The Americans reached the top just after noon, clawed their way across the open ground, and were shredded by crossfire within minutes. By late afternoon, the order came to pull back, but the wounded couldn't move. Some were tangled in barbed wire, others lay pinned beneath fallen timber or trapped in shell craters. When the stretcher teams tried to extract them, mortars rained down, forcing everyone below the ridgeline. Now, as Doss pulls himself over the ridge lip, the only sound is the wind and the faint groaning of men half buried in the rubble. The plateau is a graveyard. Shattered trees lean at impossible angles. Craters steam with rainwater and blood. The air smells of cordite and burned flesh. Doss stays low, crawling through the debris, listening. A groan to his left, a wet cough ahead. Somewhere in the smoke, a man whispers, "Help me, please, somebody." Doss finds the first soldier wedged between 2 fallen logs, his leg mangled below the knee. The man's eyes widen when he sees the medic's armband. "You came back," he breathes. "You crazy son of a bitch." Doss doesn't waste time. He tears open a bandage, wraps the shredded limb as tightly as he can, ties it off. The soldier screams. Doss whispers, "I've got you. Hold on." He drags him toward the cliff edge, inch by inch, using a shattered rifle stock as a makeshift sled. Machine gun fire stitches the ground 10 feet away. Doss keeps moving. At the rope, he loops it under the soldier's arms, lowers him over the edge, hand over hand, until the men below pull him to safety. 1 down, 13 to go, and only 3 bandages left. If stories like this make you imagine what you'd do under fire, tell us in the comments how you think you'd react in this situation. And stay with us for the next chapters. Part 2. The bandages run out after the 3rd man. Doss kneels beside a sergeant who took shrapnel to the chest and realizes he has nothing left. No clean bandages, no morphine, nothing but prayer and his own trembling hands. He presses his palms against the wound, whispering, "Lord, please, just one more. Just let me save one more." The bleeding slows. The sergeant's breathing steadies. Doss looks down at his own undershirt, already soaked with sweat and dirt, and makes a decision. He tears it. Strip by strip, he fashions a compress, binds it tight against the wound, and drags the sergeant to the rope. The improvised bandage holds. Barely. By the time he reaches the 4th man, a rifleman pinned beneath a collapsed beam, Doss has started scavenging. He tears strips from the dead soldier's jacket lying in the mud, uses bootlaces to tie off a severed artery, crushes sulfur powder into open wounds with his bare fingers. When a man's arm is nearly severed, he splints it with a broken rifle barrel and wraps it with canvas torn from a tent half. Every choice is a gamble. Every bandage he fashions from cloth could fail. Every knot could slip. But he keeps moving, keeps dragging, keeps lowering men over the cliff. The enemy doesn't let up. Mortars scream down every few minutes on the rain-slick slopes of Hacksaw Ridge, shaking the plateau, showering him with dirt and shrapnel. He crawls through kill zones, follows the sound of groaning, finds men half buried in rubble. Some are conscious, some aren't. One soldier begs him to leave, convinced they'll both die. Doss shakes his head. "I'm not leaving you." Lieutenant Gorman watches from below through field glasses, trying to make sense of what he's seeing. One man, no weapon. Moving across ground, the entire company couldn't hold. Every few minutes, another body appears at the cliff edge, lowered on that fraying rope. Gorman counts them. 5, 6, 7. "How is he still up there?" someone asks. Gorman doesn't answer. He doesn't have one. At the aid station, 200 yards behind the ridge, Dr. Weinstein works by lantern light under a canvas tarp. The wounded keep arriving, muddy, bloody, barely conscious. Most are bandaged with improvised dressings, torn shirts, canvas strips, bootlaces tied as tourniquets. Weinstein recognizes the work. Field expedient, desperate, effective. "Who's doing the bandaging up there?" he asks a stretcher-bearer. "Doss. The medic who won't carry a rifle." Weinstein pauses, forceps in hand. "He's still up there. Been up there for hours." Weinstein returns to his work, but his hands move a little faster now. Back on the ridge, Doss finds the 8th man unconscious in a crater, both legs shattered. He has no splints, no proper bandages, no stretcher. He fashions a drag litter from broken branches and a tent canvas, wraps the legs as best he can with strips torn from his own trousers, and pulls the man across 50 yards of open ground while machine gun fire snaps overhead. By the time he reaches the cliff edge, his palms are bleeding through the makeshift bandages he wrapped around them earlier. The rope bites into his skin. He lowers the man anyway, teeth clenched, muscles screaming. 8 down, 6 to go. And the night is only half over. Part 3. Somewhere after midnight, the firing slows. The Japanese pull back toward their bunkers, regrouping for a dawn assault. The ridge falls into an eerie quiet, broken only by the wind and the faint cries of the wounded. Doss stumbles through the darkness of Hacksaw Ridge's shattered plateau, guided by sound alone. A cough, a whimper, the faint scrape of boots on stone. He finds the 9th man pinned beneath a collapsed tree, ribs crushed. Doss levers the timber off with a shattered pole, wraps the man's torso with the last piece of clean cloth he can find, a strip torn from a dead soldier's jacket, and drags him to the rope. The 10th man is a machine gunner, unconscious and barely breathing. Doss slaps him awake, drags him upright, walks him to the cliff like a drunken brother, whispering encouragement with every step. The 11th is a chaplain's assistant, with both legs broken. Doss uses his own belt as a tourniquet, fashions splints from rifle stocks, and lowers him down with agonizing care. Each man becomes a mission. Each bandage, improvised, torn, bloodstained, becomes a lifeline. The rifleman from Ohio watches from below as another body appears at the cliff edge. He stopped counting after 10. He stopped joking after 5. Now he just watches, silent, as Doss's silhouette moves across the ridge in the darkness, searching. "He's going to get himself killed," someone mutters. The rifleman doesn't respond. He's thinking about what he said earlier. What the hell is he going to do with bandages? Now he knows. Lieutenant Gorman receives a radio message from battalion. Pull back to secondary positions. Consolidate. Prepare for morning counterattack. He looks up at the ridge, at the rope still moving, and makes a decision. He ignores the order. "We're staying," he tells his radioman. "As long as Doss is up there, we're staying." On the ridge, Doss finds the 12th man bleeding from a stomach wound, barely conscious. He has no bandages left, not even improvised ones. He tears the last clean section from his own undershirt, the piece he was saving, and presses it against the wound with both hands, praying aloud now, voice hoarse and trembling. "Please, Lord, please. Just a few more. Just let me get them home." The bleeding slows. The bandage holds. Doss ties it off with a strip of cloth from the man's own torn sleeve and drags him to the rope. 12 down, 2 to go. His hands are shaking so badly now he can barely tie a knot. His knees are bleeding through his trousers. His vision blurs from exhaustion and dehydration. But somewhere in the darkness he hears another voice calling "Medic!" and he forces himself to stand. How many times can a man tell himself just one more before something inside him breaks? Doss doesn't know. He only knows he can't stop. Not yet. Would you follow the orders exactly, or trust what your own eyes and instincts tell you in a moment like this? Comment which path you'd take and share this episode with someone who loves real human stories from history. Part 4. The 13th man is dying. Doss finds him in a shell crater, half submerged in muddy water, a sucking chest wound pulling air and blood with each ragged breath. No bandages, no cloth, nothing left to tear from his own uniform. Doss looks down at his hands, wrapped in strips of fabric he salvaged earlier, already soaked through with blood. He unwraps them. His palms are raw and bleeding from the rope, blistered from dragging men across broken ground, but the fabric is still mostly intact. He presses it against the chest wound, holds it there with one hand while using the other to fashion a seal from a piece of oiled canvas he finds in the crater. The man gasps, coughs, breathes. Doss drags him out of the water across the plateau to the cliff edge. His own hands leave bloody prints on the rope as he lowers the man down. When the stretcher bearers below catch him, they see the makeshift bandage, the medic's own hand wrapping, blood-soaked and fraying, and understand what it cost. 13 down, 1 to go. But Doss can't find the 14th man. He searches the plateau in the pre-dawn darkness of Hacksaw Ridge, calling out softly, listening. The 77th Infantry Division positions below wait in silence. No response, just wind and the distant rumble of artillery on another part of the island. He's about to give up, about to climb down and accept that he couldn't save them all, when he hears it. A whisper, barely audible. Here. Doss finds him wedged in a narrow crevice between two boulders, one leg trapped beneath fallen rock. A corporal, young, maybe 19. His face is pale, lips blue from shock and blood loss. A tourniquet, improvised from a rifle sling, is already tied above his knee, but it's slipping. "I tried," the corporal whispers. "I tried to tie it like you do." Doss nods. "You did good." He has nothing left. No bandages, no cloth, no rope for his hands. His medical pouch is empty except for a single sulfur powder packet. He looks at the corporal's trapped leg, at the tourniquet slowly loosening, and makes a choice. He uses the last sulfur powder on the wound. Then he removes his own helmet, fills it with rainwater from a nearby puddle, and uses it to wash away the worst of the mud and debris. He reties the tourniquet with his bare, bleeding hands, pulling it tight enough to hold but not so tight it causes more damage. Then he wedges himself between the boulders and levers the rock off the corporal's leg. It takes 10 minutes. By the time the leg is free, Doss's shoulders are screaming and his hands are shaking uncontrollably. But the corporal is free. He drags him to the cliff edge. The rope is frayed now, fibers splitting under the weight of 13 bodies. Doss loops it under the corporal's arms anyway and begins lowering him over the edge. Halfway down, the rope snaps. Doss catches it just in time, his raw hands wrapping around the frayed end, the sudden weight nearly pulling him over the cliff. He holds on, teeth clenched, every muscle in his body burning, until the men below grab the corporal and pull him to safety. 14. Doss collapses at the cliff edge, staring at his hands. They're wrapped in nothing now, just raw flesh and blood. Around him the ridge is silent. The wounded are gone. The voices have stopped calling "medic" into the darkness. He's done it. Somehow, impossibly, he's done it. But as he lies there, too exhausted to move, a single thought cuts through the relief. What if there's one more I didn't find? Part 5. The official after-action report will say Desmond Doss saved 75 men on Hacksaw Ridge. What it won't say is that he spent the rest of that night convinced he'd missed someone. When the stretcher team finally reaches him at dawn, they find him still searching the plateau, stumbling through the rubble on bleeding feet, calling out to shadows and smoke. His hands are wrapped in torn strips of canvas someone threw up to him from below. His eyes are wild, unfocused. He keeps whispering the same thing. Did I get them all? Did I count right? Lieutenant Gorman has to physically pull him back from the cliff edge. You got them, Doss. You got them all. But Doss shakes his head, trembling. I counted 14. What if there were 15? It takes 2 men to carry him down the rope, because he won't stop trying to climb back up. The secret that the medal citation will never mention, the truth that Doss carries in his chest for the rest of his life, is not that he was brave on Hacksaw Ridge in April 1945. It's that he was terrified. Every single moment. Every step across that plateau, every time he reached for a bandage that wasn't there, every improvised dressing he tied with shaking hands, he was certain it wouldn't work. Certain the next mortar would kill him, certain he'd fail the next wounded man calling his name. And the prayer he whispered over and over, Lord, please, just one more, wasn't confidence. It was desperation. A plea from a man who knew he was operating on nothing but faith and fraying fabric, who felt the weight of every life slipping through his bloody fingers, who understood that bandages were never supposed to be enough against steel and fire and the certainty of death. At the aid station, Dr. Weinstein works on Doss's hands for an hour, removing embedded rope fibers, cleaning burns and lacerations, wrapping them in proper medical gauze, the kind Doss ran out of before midnight. While he works, men keep arriving with stories. The rifleman from Ohio, who once mocked the unarmed medic, now can't look at him without his voice breaking. He saved my brother, he tells Weinstein. Number 7, I watched him tear his own shirt to wrap the wound. Weinstein nods but doesn't speak. He's looking at Doss's hands, at the evidence of what it actually cost to lower 14 men over a cliff with nothing but improvised bandages and raw faith. Later, when Doss is finally resting under morphine, Lieutenant Gorman writes the initial report. He struggles with the numbers. The men remember 14 being lowered that night. But earlier in the day, before Doss went back up alone, there were dozens of wounded scattered across the ridge. How many did he actually save? The counting becomes impossible, the accounts conflicting. Eventually, command will settle on 75. A number that feels both impossibly large and somehow inadequate to describe what happened on that ridge. But Doss will always remember 14. 14 bandages he didn't have. 14 improvised dressings torn from shirts and jackets and his own bleeding hands. 14 times he whispered, just one more, into the darkness and somehow found the strength to keep moving. 14 men who went home because courage, it turns out, doesn't always need steel. Sometimes it just needs someone stubborn enough to believe that bandages might be enough. Part 6. 3 months later, Desmond Doss is wounded by a grenade on Okinawa and evacuated stateside. 5 years later, he receives the Medal of Honor at the White House. 50 years later, he sits on his porch in Georgia, an old man now, watching rain fall through the trees. His hands still shake sometimes. Nerve damage from the rope, the doctor said, though Doss knows it's more than that. It's memory. Muscle and bone, remembering the weight of 14 men, and a fraying line between life and death. A historian visits, recording stories for the National Archives. She asks him about the night on Hacksaw Ridge, about the 75 men the citation claims he saved. Doss is quiet for a long moment, watching the rain. I remember 14, he says finally. I remember running out of bandages around midnight. I remember tearing up my shirt, my trousers, anything I could find. I remember thinking, this isn't going to work. Cloth and prayer aren't enough. But they were, the historian says gently. Doss looks at his hands, at the scars that never quite healed. Sometimes I still smell wet rope, he says, or I'll be folding laundry and the feel of torn fabric will take me right back. I'll be standing at that cliff edge again, lowering a man I can barely see in the dark, whispering the same prayer I said 100 times that night. Lord, please, just one more. He's quiet again. The rain drums on the porch roof, the same sound it made on Hacksaw Ridge that April night in 1945, when the 77th Infantry Division pulled back and one unarmed medic stayed behind. People ask me if I was scared, Doss continues. They want to hear that I was brave, that I knew God would protect me, that I never doubted. He shakes his head. I was terrified. Every moment, every bandage I tied, I was sure it would fail. Every man I dragged, I was certain we'd both die before we reached the rope. Then why did you keep going? Doss considers this, the question he's been asked 1,000 times, in 1,000 different ways, for 50 years. Because they were calling for me, he says simply, and I couldn't leave knowing I might save just one more. The historian stops her recorder. Some truths, she realizes, are too heavy for official records. The legend says Desmond Doss saved 75 men with nothing but faith and courage. But the man sitting across from her knows a different truth, that he saved 14 men with improvised bandages and bleeding hands, and spent the rest of his life wondering about the 15th man he might have missed. The rain keeps falling. Somewhere in Georgia, an old man closes his eyes and sees a ridge, hears voices calling medic into the darkness, feels the rough bite of rope in raw palms and the terrible weight of trying to save lives with nothing but torn cloth and desperate prayer. They said courage needs steel. He brought bandages. And 14 men, maybe 75, maybe more, the counting lost to chaos and smoke and the impossible mathematics of one man moving through machine gun fire. 14 men went home because of it. Because sometimes, when everything else runs out, bandages and stubborn faith are exactly enough. If this story reminded you that behind every medal there's a human being carrying memories we'll never fully see, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to revisit history with us in the next story.